Yes, it's all set up now. Okay, so hello everyone again. It's a pleasure for me to host the last specialist meeting of this year. And today's host, Peter Cook, was introduced to me by Ian Pateman. So thank you, Ian, for your introduction. Peter will talk about creativity today, how we can foster creativity, how we can help businesses to create creative culture. And I think we might listen to some music as well. Uh, to briefly introduce Peter, I'm not going to read his biography because it would probably take the whole meeting. So I'm just going to say he is a writer. He published several business books. He is a mentor. He is a teacher. He is or used to teach MBA program called Creativity, Innovation and Change. He is a keynote speaker. He is a prize winner. He is a business owner and a passionate advocate for better politics and business practices. And based on our last call, I think he might be a pretty good musician too. So that's all from me. And Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all from all over the world in Kent. That's remarkable. I understand a little bit about you. Ian told me a tiny bit. I believe that you're sort of innovation advisors, and the brief here was to say, well, what's creativity got to do with innovation? Which sounds like what's love got to do with it? But there we go. So that's what we're going to do in a moment. There may be a bit of music, just as a sort of demonstration, rather than we're not going to have a rock concert here. So if it's not your taste of music, it doesn't really matter. We will sort of illustrate some of the points I'm making with a bit of music later on. So that's the brief. Thank you for that brilliant introduction. I hardly need to go further. It makes me sound very important, but I'm going to do my own introduction. At the age of 5, I wanted to be in the Beatles, but couldn't get a job. I wanted to be a chemist. I became one. I worked in Wellcome, the philanthropic pharmaceutical company, and that enabled me to travel the world. So although I've studied widely and done 3.5 degrees and all that stuff, the University of Life and being in a rock band taught me how to deal with audiences who throw bottles at you sometime if it's really bad. So I think that sort of training isn't taught normally at the universities that I've been to, but that's my life. And about 30 years ago, I left the pharmaceutical company. I stopped tutoring. Well, I carried on tutoring MBAs, but I started a business that focuses exclusively on purposeful creativity and its conversion into innovation, because it's a real simple equation. If you want innovation, you have to tolerate creativity, but lots of chief executives would rather not have it. They'd like to turn it on like a tap when they want it and turn it off. But you have to have good creativity to get good innovation. So good ideas, not any old ideas. And that's what we're going to focus on. I'm going to use 1 or 2 slides. I'm just going to set that up to do so. Thank you for Lucy for helping me use Teams, because I'm a novice on Teams. So let's have a look. Yeah, we got it here. Now, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Let me make sure it's big enough.
You want to put it on the slide mode?
That's what I'm doing, yes.
Oh, right, yeah.
There we go. Bizarre. Now, I'm doing this for free, but if you like it, tell anyone you want to about some of the books I've written. Here's a few of them. As Lucy did say, I won a prize from Richard Branson for the first one, Leading Innovation, Creativity and Enterprise. And this really is going to be a very cut down sort of exposure to 6 months of working late at night to write the book. But I was blessed by working at the Open University. And you mentioned the course that I taught on the MBA course. It changed my life studying creativity, innovation and change at the Open University. And it's on most of the shelves of all the top universities, because they nick all the stuff. So I thought, why wouldn't I do that? But in fact, what it made me do was leave a very well-paid job and start a business. So for 30 years, I've been a small business person. So I know something about this, I suppose, but we'll see. Anyway, it says exploring the next thing, creativity, innovation and business with a bit of music. You're welcome, by the way, to interrupt during or at the end. It's really We call that feedback in management circles, or heckling in rock music. So you're welcome to heckle during the thing. I may be going to cover it later, but please heckle away. So I thought I'd start with the simplest of simplest things. I mean, we've got to get our terms right. Creativity is about sitting in the attic and thinking of a novel idea, you know, the wheel or something or other. And we've all done that. People say, you know, some people are more creative than others, but everyone is creative. We'll come to that later. But innovation, which is probably what most of you are more interested in, your clients are more interested in, is the successful and sustainable implementation of novel ideas. That is much different than creativity, because lots of creativity is wasted. In other words, people don't go on to execute their ideas, and it's execution that it differentiates creative people from, you know, people who succeed in the world of, in any world, be it music, business, or anything else. What is creativity then? There is no one definition. I wrote a book called Best Practice Creativity in 1998, which I refreshed with Bloomsbury, and I used these definitions, which I looked widely across the literature. Seeing something different in the ordinary. We'll come to some examples later on about that. And novelty and appropriateness. You know, we've all thought of daft ideas, often when we've had a beer or something, or just because we're mad. But novelty on its own is not sufficient to guarantee innovation. Aptness or appropriateness matters a great deal. And aptness can include timing and lots of other factors. So when people say I'm creative, and I work with loads of musicians, they're often sitting in their attic like an artist, sort of waiting for the light to come right. Well, sometimes the light never comes right. So I'm not really talking about artistic creativity in this. I am talking about business creativity. Aptness, appropriateness is key to this. The third thing shines the light on sort of persistence, and Dyson is the best example of this, or Edison is an even better example, because allegedly, depending on which side of the pond you sit, he did 1,000 prototypes before he discovered the light bulb, or 10,000 if it's been amped up a bit. But Dyson allegedly had 5,128 prototypes for his Hoover. He doesn't call it a Hoover, of course, but there we go. So it's the persistence, getting up early, working hard, and finding something unique. And of course, creativity is nothing without the hard work, the perspiration. So that old quote of inspiration and perspiration applies. So to repeat that, creativity is about purposeful improvisation or inspiration, and innovation is all about hard work. Some people that run away when the flip chart has been packed away from the brainstorming session, they think they've innovated, but in fact they've only begun that process. And I spend a lot of time with companies like Pfizer, Unilever, helping them to get the stuff off the flip chart and enact it. And that is where the magic happens, I think, from 30 years of doing this. Ideas are plentiful, in other words. Now, let's move to the organizational context. This is really rapid, by the way. So head lice, I've called this. If you want to buy the book in Chinese, you can. There we go, promo over. In this book, I simplified the idea of sort of creativity and innovation by suggesting that there would be a pipeline with ideas, people and money going in, and outcoming sustainable ideas, returns on investment, and wonderful new products and services and all the other things. I suggested that, but of course it's untrue, because many of you will realize that actually I used the word intestine in the Bloomsbury book, but they objected to it, so I had to convert it to a pipeline. It doesn't much matter. But the point of the matter is the pipeline is not straight, because the organizational structure has many divisions, and silos stop innovation sometimes. There are sort of roadblocks and, you know, ways in, and there are also some fast tracks in terms of like drug companies buy the inspiration in and then do the execution later on, so they short circuit the process. So there's a whole lot in the book about how organizations either help or hinder creativity, and of course you need what I call blow and suck to do this. Blow meaning pushing more ideas through the pipeline, suck actually meaning leadership. That doesn't mean to say that leadership sucks, but it does mean suction. In other words, push and pull communication. So enabling behaviors of leaders which I call suck, are things like permission to fail, permission to get it wrong a few times, but not endlessly, and creating a culture whereby these things are encouraged, if not rewarded, but certainly encouraged. And getting people to go round different ways and use venture teams and other things outside of your organization to speed up innovation. There's a lot to unpack in that slide, and I'm not going to do it now, but that's the sort of, so we've done the small picture, and we're going to go back to the small picture because we're all individuals, but there is a whole lot in the book about organizations and how they help and hinder themselves in this world. So back to personal perspectives. There's another book on there, damn. Now, if you've read Michael Curtin, who came from Cambridge, actually, since one of you is from Cambridge, he devised a way of testing people. If you've done Myers-Briggs or other things, he'd done a specialist test on adapters and innovators, and you can get a score, and then you can go, well, I'm an innovator, I scored 123, or I'm an adapter, I'm just a slow chugger, or whatever. He didn't use those words, by the way. But the sort of picture I've put on this slide illustrates that everyone is creative, and we need both sorts. So the adapters, if you see them going up the hill here, they will get there. It will take a long time. There won't be many accidents, and lots of people will help in other adapters will help them get up the hill. The extreme innovator, you notice there will be quite a lot of deaths on the way to get on the top of the hill. And, people will try ingenious methods, many of which will fail. This is the dynamic of the sorts of people that work in organisations. And I suppose we'll come on to conversation later on, but probably some of you work with inventors. And of course, the failure rate of inventions is very high. And many of those people will be on the right side of my graph. They need the adapters more than they realise to help them get up the hill. So you can do this sort of analysis. But actually, I think it's quite easy to spot them. And if you've got experience, which as sort of innovation people, you probably see lots of people, you probably know which of these people you work with, and therefore how to help them, of course, because they need sometimes the opposite thing. So the adapters actually rule the planet because they don't think of things that nobody wants. And if you're thinking about inventing a new way of brushing your teeth, it had better look something like a toothbrush rather than a sort of chainsaw, because you won't get people to try it if you make it look too different than the prevailing wisdom. I'm sitting on an iMac here. Looks rather like the last iMac I had, actually, disappointingly so, because I've just paid some money for it. But, so the whole thing of style and substance, one has to think about the whole chain, be it the content, what it actually does, or indeed how it's presented. Because that makes people want to buy it if we're talking about products. Same applies to services. So not all creativity leads to innovation. Here's some great examples. Da Vinci invented the helicopter 300 years too early because there wasn't the technology to make it. There's hundreds of patents for mouse traps on the internet. Most of them don't work. Some of them, I believe there's one that deludes the mouse into a Harry Potter fantasy. The mouse doesn't care. The mouse just wants to eat the cheese. So sometimes simple gets a better result. And for those of you that have ever worked in pharmaceuticals, this product called Exubera, has anyone heard of it? I can't see your faces, but shout if you have. It was a non-needle insulin. And if anyone takes insulin, you know how valuable that might be. You don't want to inject yourself every day. So they invented this thing called Exubera. And it was going to be the next blockbuster drug. And they obviously had to have a device to give it to people. And it was through inhalation. And I have got the slides, but not today. It's too many slides otherwise. The design department produced this thing. Everyone knew it was a piece of crap. That's a technical term. I used to be a scientist, remember. Everyone knew it was rubbish. But nobody dared say so. Why did they not say so? And the thing failed. It was billions of dollars lost. It was a complete failure. And why was it a failure? Because you had to take something more or less the size of a small fire extinguisher to the restaurant at night to go. And some people compared it to bongs, which you use to inhale drugs and things like that, not Pfizer's drugs, obviously. I mean, it had a huge amount of ridicule, and a 7-year-old child could have told the chief executive that it was not a good device. Why did he not listen? Because he had said, this product is going to market, come hell or high water, because it was the only thing they had in the pipeline at the time. So this is why leadership sometimes stops people saying, please, sir, it's a piece of crap. So that's a hugely reduced story of the thing, and there's much more technical detail. But that's why it matters to have a culture that allows people to speak up, because it costs billions of dollars if you don't. So how does creativity work? This is what we came for. Again, 5 ideas. I went right back to the 1960s, some of the great books that are written on this. And of course, some people believe it's outside of my control. It's an act of God, divinity. And they cite people like Mozart and geniuses and Lang Lang as the reason why they can't do it. Utter rubbish. But, you know, there we go. That's what some people believe. It's a God-given, gift. And therefore, they can't be creative because they haven't been blessed by God. But there are other more useful theories here. One is luck and capitalizing on luck. The story of saccharin is a very good example. Guy sort of goes to do some experiments. He's a bad chemist, so he licks his fingers at the end of the experiment and thinks, oh, that's really nice. That's sweet. I'll try this on my wife, which we call in the trade a clinical trial. No, he didn't. So he tries it out and realizes this accident he's had has some other useful properties. And lo and behold, saccharin is born. Planning to be lucky, the best example I can think of is Viagra, a drug that was developed for hypotension, didn't work, but they noticed there were side effects, and Pfizer then capitalized on it. That took an awful lot of endurance from the marketing director, who she stuck out for this and said, I know this is not our market, but we need to follow it through, because nobody in Pfizer at that time wanted to invent drugs that were essentially cosmetic drugs, really, rather than serious drugs for cancer. Same thing happened in my time at Wellcome. I worked on the first AIDS drug, and the company didn't want to go to doctors and talk to them about this awful disease. So we had to really work hard to get the reps to explain why it was, well, to be comfortable at explaining why, it mattered. The other one is the endurance thing, which I've covered, Dyson and the light bulb. And of course, the program that I sat on, Creativity, Innovation and Change for the Open University, and the 30 years of work I've done for large companies that have lost the power of reason, they don't want necessarily to have a culture of creativity because it's expensive, but they do want to turn on the tap from time to time for a specific reason. So they want me to teach them methods of how you can temporarily or otherwise have more creativity, more useful creativity. So of course, brainstorming is the standard method, but the program I went on taught 128 different methods of divergent and convergent thinking. And some of them you'll be familiar with, like 6 thinking hats, drawing, and all there's hundreds of methods. And Pilkington glass is a good example of using a method, of having a systematic innovation method to ensure that you get your return on investment. So the ones at the top are essentially passive. You have to wait for luck to happen, on number 2 anyway, and you have to wait for God to smile at you if it's number 1. I'm afraid businesses aren't interested in waiting for divine intervention, but they are interested in the ones at the bottom, I find. Particularly sometimes temporarily to get a new product going, they want some methods to help them think outside the box, which is an awful term, but it does apply because we all live inside boxes. So here are some methodologies, therefore. The importance of looking at things really closely. People tell me I'm a big picture person. Absolute garbage. You need to be a big picture person, but you also need to pay attention to detail. If we were talking about politics, Boris Johnson is a great big picture person, but didn't pay any attention to the detail that has ramifications for all sorts of things in life. But moving back to science, Velcro is a great example of close observation. The guy that thought of Velcro was an engineer, and he went out walking one day in the fields and picked up these sticky buds. I think I forget what the technical term, but you know what I mean, these sort of things that stick to your trousers. Sticky willies, they call them in Scotland. I don't know why, don't ask me. But quite normally, as all engineers and all of us do, he took them back because he was curious and put them under his microscope, which we've all got one of course, and discovered that they had hooks. And all he did was replicate what biology does so well. Biology is so much better at creativity than the human being. So Velcro, if you look at it under a microscope, it replicates that biological property. The second one is reflection, because we're all busy. People say, oh, give me creativity fast. No, actually, sometimes a lot of creativity is sort of hidden through not bothering to reflect on things. And the mythical discovery of benzene, the chemical benzene by Kekule, it was allegedly done by him dozing in front of the fire. I like to add on for a flourish, he was probably taking drugs, but it's not true. But never let the story interfere with a good never let the truth interfere with a good story. He was dozing in front of the fire, and allegedly he saw a snake bite its own tail. And he had been working on the structure of benzene as being a linear chain of molecules. And he suddenly realized it was a chain. And that was a big breakthrough. Whether he sat in front of the fire or whatever is perhaps immaterial here. Pilkington thought of his plate glass through the washing up bowl. I'm not going to go through all of these. And Einstein has a sort of Z to A approach for creativity. Yeah, work from the end backwards. So he imagined what it would be like to float on a beam of light, and then did the math, because that's an easier way to do it than to do the maths forward. Apparently, if you're Einstein, I'm not. And the Viagra example I mentioned, this took a lot of hard work in terms of hawking the product round the company, saying, look, I know it's for sexual health, but we should do it. And the marketing director and several other people were involved in the advocacy chain, which was difficult because the company didn't want to necessarily go into that field at the time. I'll stop there, actually. Is there any questions people have got? Because I'm struggling and I need my tea anyway. So are there any questions or reflections at this point? And then we'll move on to something else.
I can make a quick point.
Hmm.
I'm reminded of the Peter, is it Peter Drucker that
Yeah.
who said, he said culture eats innovation for breakfast. I think that's what he was saying. So basically, if the company culture doesn't sort of allow for this type of innovation in terms of product, it could potentially kill the idea. And I suppose
he actually said culture eats strategy for breakfast. Tom Peters said strategy is execution. They're all very much on the same page, but Drucker helpfully shone the point on culture. Yeah, so there we are. Yeah, carry on.
Well, no, it's just interesting that his point around, and you're talking about Viagra. So, this company obviously saw themselves in a particular way, but developed a very interesting product that could make a lot of money, but almost didn't come to pass because of, I suppose, the internal strategy within the company didn't want to go in that direction.
The bigger mistake was Exubera, because that was a blockbuster. I mean, Viagra wasn't such a huge, winner for them in terms of income, but Exubera would have transformed their fortunes. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Philip. Any others before we pass on?
Yes. I guess in my experience of working for both big companies and small companies is that generally the smaller companies, like a lot of the SMEs we work with, are more innovative because they don't have the structure that stops them being innovative.
Which is why I didn't dwell on the intestine, because I guess that many of you work with SMEs. They don't have all the problems. Now, you could draw a graph with size and stupidity along the other axis, and there'd be a linear relationship generally, with exceptions. But small companies don't have so many of those silos. They have other problems, but they don't have that structural problem. Go on, Ian.
No, that's just the point that I was making. That in my experience of working with very clever companies, the more they grow, if they don't grow in the right way, and they can grow in the right way, but often as they grow, they put in structures that stop the creativity.
I shall come on to that a bit, but yes, absolutely they do. And the clever move is to have you guys explaining what, or helping them to put in a growth structure rather than a structure which hinders.
I think quite a lot of that, you can see it in those sort of mid-sized companies. Once they start splitting into departments, you get that kind of silo effect, or you create an R&D or an innovation department, but if they're not linking in with the business development people who are on the ground with clients, then you're not getting that flow of sort of need coming up through as well. You're just sort of having the crazy ideas that aren't necessarily fit for purpose or for market sort of thing. It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, so growth is a tremendously difficult stage and needs to be managed very carefully, actually. You're right, Caroline. Yeah.
I had a really good example as well of that sort of back to front innovation. And I once saw the head of innovation of Amazon do a keynote speech. And this was sort of, do you remember when about 10 years ago when they started saying they were going to deliver by drone, and basically the whole world just laughed at them? Because we were all just like, that's just not a thing. How could you? And he said that what they did was, in their brainstorming sessions, they start from the end. They go, what product do we want to bring to market in 10 years' time? And then they work back from the answer. So when they came up with drone delivery packages, they analysed technology that they had and the gaps, and then they developed the gaps to make it possible. And I just thought that was really amazing insight.
And it's
all reverse engineering.
Reverse engineering the problem. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
it's always what I do if I go to a company that wants me to lock them away for 2 days to think of new ideas. They say we want some ideas. I say, well, why and to what end? And we work on the outcome first and work backwards from that. But they typically say, let's just have a throw-about session. I say, well, that's unpurposeful. How many ideas do you want? Do you want a small group of highly developed ideas, or do you just want to have a bit of fun? I don't mind them having fun, but it costs more to them, and they don't necessarily get anything. So I often work from the end backwards, actually. So I clarify people's what they want out of something I do for them before we begin. I think although people say, well, you just come along with a guitar and do some creativity, there's always a boring proposal and a discussion about what is wanted, because without that, it's just an aimless search. We will come on to that, but yeah. Okay, any more? Otherwise, I shall move on. I'll move on. Okay, window, back in the room. Right, okay, where we were. So the last part of this, I've sidestepped so much, but there we go. The last part of this is on music. And if you're interested in any of the music books I've written, they all have music in to some degree, but I do specialize in blending parallel ideas and insights from music with business theory, which sounds bizarre, but it has kept me in business for 32 years, so I'm not about to knock it too much. I wrote one book which had a title which got me into a bit of trouble with Pfizer in New York. The vice president of R&D wanted me to speak in New York, and he said, my mate, in the vice president of HR would like to ring you. And we had this conversation, and he hadn't actually done any homework whatsoever, but he'd seen the cover of the book. And he started out by saying, hey, Peter, he said, I've been a bad boy in my time. I've been in a rock band, and I get where you're coming from. I thought, what? And he said, but we're having a few problems with some of your concepts here. I said, what, leadership? He said, no, sex. We don't have that at Pfizer. So I scratched my head, laughing internally, of course. I went, okay. I said, you do make Viagra, by the way, and your country's got the biggest porno industry in the world. You do realise there's no sex in the book. And I waited while he was scratching his head, saying, excuse me. But the problem was, of course, he was the vice president of HR and political correctness. Two problems. He's in New York, so they're very worried about everything. And he's in a pharmaceutical company, so they're very worried about everything. And he saw the whole thing as being career limiting because he thought there would be bad language and nudity at the seminar. And I now offer these things for extra money, of course. No, I don't. But, and so the conversation, and he had just read the cover. So someone said to me later on, with a bit of reflection, is don't put the word on the cover. That's the answer. So I wrote the music of business, which It's the same book but tamed, and it's not the same book, but it's chapterized for busy people, and it doesn't have sex in the title. So there's another lesson for you. Not if you think of publishing a book, try to think of the title correctly. But there we go. So the session is myths and riffs of creativity. What can we learn about creativity and business from music? A little bit, actually, quite a lot, but we can't stretch it to every area of life. Quick lesson. You don't have to be musical to get this, but there are 12 intervals in an octave. I'll just explain. So here we go. That is sort of do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do if you were musically inclined, or if you're in ABBA, then it's sort of it's most of ABBA's music, and the Beatles' music is made out of those sort of harmonies. So that's 12 intervals. In fact, this is 8 intervals, but there are 12 in an octave, and they can be rearranged in different conventions. So a convention is like accountancy in business, but in music we call it harmony. And the whole point of creative is to bend or break those conventions. That's the point of it. So what is a riff then? Does anyone answer that question? Are there any musicians in the room? You've got some clues down here, because I've done a fake wiki on riffs below. But anyone name me a riff then? Their favourite music? The room has gone quiet.
So, Fog on the Tynes, all mine, all mine. I like that one. That's a cool riff.
That's a lyrical riff, which is great.
Yeah,
and,
it's from Gaza. That's a good one.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And they tend to be things a bit more like... and things of that nature. So that's a riff. Trademark, a lot of heavy metal has riffs in it. So Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. We're not here to do a musical lecture, but there we are. That's the sort of music bit done. And of course, it's an earworm for those that are not inclined to think about the word riff. And of course, you think about how riffs are used in business, in politics, and everything else. People come up with riffs all the time. Some of them are really good riffs because they stick in people's mind and they mean something, and some of them are sort of meaningless. And I'm not going to go through some of the more meaningless ones, but I mean, if you get something that people believe in, and Richard Branson is quite good at incalculating words that people believe in, then you can get your riff lasting for longer. And it's the same with music. You make millions of pounds if you produce a successful riff. So if we compare some riffs, here's one. What is that riff? There's a clue on the slide title, really.
Yeah, I know it.
Deep Purple.
Deep Purple,
yeah.
1972, I think. You're not getting points for this, by the way, but you've done very well. This song is still being played in guitar shops all over the world by young people who find it very difficult to play. But actually, if we switch over to the Spice Girls, which is a little bit a little bit more recent. Then you got so B has not the same notes, but more or less the similar notes. But nobody probably has ever thought that Wannabe sounds like a heavy metal classic, and it doesn't, of course, because all the other artifacts of the music are different. So, but you know, most of popular music is made up of the same 4 chords, rearranged slightly differently. But don't tell anyone, because it will spoil their enjoyment of it. So the point about this, and there's several points to be dragged out of this, but we don't have time to do them all. One, thinking about the person that wrote Smoke on the Water, which is this chap, Richie Blackmore, the miserable git on the right-hand side of my screen. He pointed out that you have to keep things simple. So it has 4 notes. And in musical terminology, it's got the 6th interval in it, which is the dark note of the demon. So you've got, that actually sounds wrong because it's not a consonant note. And you can look at graphs of physics of what notes sound nice together. So this is not the sort of riff that the Beatles would have produced or ABBA. It summons up the devil quite literally, because in the 16th century, the Catholic Church tried to ban the 6th interval because they felt it did summon up the devil. I'm not making a religious point, so if you're Catholic, it's fine to be Catholic, or any other religion. The point of the matter is, before the Enlightenment, the Catholic Church didn't understand that you can't ban physics. And for any of those people that are Black Sabbath fans, the first song on the first album uses the 6th interval religiously, so it is this. And that sounds a bit weird. We can demonstrate in perhaps a more simple way with another song. So some of you will have heard Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones. And that's all right, that's all in a minor scale, until it gets to this. And that clashing between, that is 1 semitone apart from the notes. And if notes are too close together without doing a boring musical lecture, they grate. But of course, that makes you a fortune, because if you can make that work and people think that's so cool, that's such a great combination of notes, then you make millions of dollars doing it. So that's the point. So enough music now. So the point of creativity is to rearrange the notes in a way that is appealing and makes you lots of money, really. So what can we learn from this? There are only 12 notes in an octave and only 8 in a scale, for most scales anyway. So music is hugely constrained in some ways, which is why, we're now repeating the same riffs really and rearranging them with other artifacts of music so that they sound like different songs. But actually they're made of most of the same songs. You listen to Ed Sheeran, it's all they're all the same 4 chords as most pop songs. But constraints are actually really good for creativity. When people say, oh, we should have no limits for our brainstorming, no, that's rubbish, actually. You have to have constraints. You have to boundary your creativity, otherwise the search is endless. And the 3M Post-it note is a good example of that. And recombining notes, recombining strategies is quite an effective adaptive strategy, because people don't always like things that are genuinely novel. You have to really work hard at marketing if you've got something that's genuinely novel. So First Direct is the good example, who combine banking with first-class customer relationship management. So has anyone banked with First Class? I'm not going to see your hand. So I used to bank with them. I don't anymore, but that's for a different reason. But it used to be, before the internet interfered, that you used to have someone who you phoned up and they said, I'd like to have some money, and they would chat to you. And years ago, someone in London was out on the razzle and lost all their money and cards and everything, and couldn't get home to Reading. And so what does he do? Does he phone the police? Does he phone no, he phones his bank, of course, because you think they'll sort it out. So he tells them that he's at Victoria Station, he's got to get to Reading. And there's no algorithm in First Direct for sorting that problem out. There is no algorithm, but the person is allowed to do what it takes and then apologize afterwards. So she advances him enough money, at that time about 100 quid, to get a taxi to Reading, takes the money off of him from First Direct, and stops him having an argument with his wife about why he's in London in the first place. That is brilliant sort of turnaround strategy, I think. So things like that are good examples, and First Direct They no longer do so much telephone banking, of course, but they had the same data as all the banks, but they used it in a different way. I think that's sort of thinking about combination, really. And convergence can be creative. So your iPhone is a great example of bringing together lots of technologies on a phone. In living memory, I remember when a phone actually could be used to phone people with. But now it does many other things. So there we are. I think that takes us to questions and comments. All my details are there. We'll give them at the end. But for now, I think it's time to get rid of this slideshow and have a conversation.
You know what I mean? Grant from Worthing. Just going back to your comment about Richard Branson and the music element, and it's just a random, strange one. In that, I was on cabin crew long haul a long time ago when Virgin were like in the infancy with a couple of 747s, and what Richard Branson did was he actually offered for anybody that would like they'd play music or sing for the whole of the flight from UK to Florida. A free flight there and free flight back. So it was, back in the day, you thought the guy must be mad to do this sort of thing. But actually, in this innovation space, you kind of think, because it's a new way of doing your business. It generates conversation. It generates sort of the profile of Virgin at the time it did. And it's just, you kind of see why he's so successful with his thought process, doing things outside the norm. It's a random comment, but it just impressed me at the time.
What Branson is uniquely good at is dropping down and seeing what the little guy does, and then
exactly
and emulating it. And he's not a brilliant innovator. Much of his stuff simply capitalizes on existing industries. He doesn't, I was going to say he doesn't go into space, but he does actually. But he uses other people to do it. He doesn't strike out and do something that nobody's done before.
He 100%.
Takes boring industries and improves them. And I used to work for him at Virgin Money doing interviews with rock stars, and all he'd done was taken over a bank for a penny, which is a good deal. He's also a very hard taskmaster. If at the top, and people think he's a lovely cuddly bear, but he's a hard thinker as well. It's not either or. So tussle with Branson, you may not win. I mean, he did the renegotiation for the rail contract one time, and I knew some people in the rail industry, and they said he came in, sat down and there for a couple of hours talking about that, and at the end of it we realized we'd been completely turned over, but we still loved him.
And that's because he's on many of the flights, so I constantly had quite a few conversations with him, but like you say, he didn't come across as a dynamic individual.
He's also a classic introvert in the sort of people think you have to be effusive to be creative. No, many great innovators need someone to help them articulate their creativity. And what Branson's uniquely good at is picking people who he trusts. And he claims that's because he's got dyslexia, so he can't read detail. So he works more. Virgin work a lot harder on recruitment than training, because in other words, if you there's the old phrase, you get hired for your skills and sacked for your attitude. Well, he hires people for their attitude and then works, if they need a little help, they get that. So he needs to trust people before he'll commit to having them in his organization. And
sorry, go on.
Go on, yeah. Go on.
No, I was going to say one last point, and it's only a random thing, but the odd thing about him was with cabin crew was you could go right through the process, so you've passed everything, but unless you look good in the uniform, they wouldn't employ you. You couldn't get away with that now, could you?
Well, we drift on to difficult topics, and we were talking before the seminar started of the bloke on Bake Off or whatever it is. I don't know what it's called. Anyway. Well, whether we're allowed to do that or not, he hired people, male and female, who look good in the cabin. It's true. It's not something that's debatable, and all airlines did that, of course. So he wasn't unique in that. But anyway, there we go. That's one of those things.
So, Grant, have you got any photographs of you in your uniform going back years?
You know what? I have. If anybody wants to see them, when I collected my wings so I could be on cabin crew. And I've got, I'll circulate a few. I think I might have sent a few, but the airline I used to work for, that sorry, I'm hogging the floor here, but one of the airlines I worked for, stewards had to wear the cap like the captain did. So when I started going to the salon where I actually met my wife, she thought I was a captain, I was a pilot. And she told her dad, I'm only 22 years of age, but she was convinced I was a pilot. Maybe that's why he let me marry her, I don't know.
How long did you keep that secret from her?
I didn't even know that she told that to him. He was sort of rubbing hands together and thinking, I've offloaded her and I'm in for a bit of money, until he found out. So, but yeah, I'll send a few pictures around. Yeah.
Yes, please do.
We want the pictures at Christmas for blackmail purposes, if nothing else. Okay. And anyone else, please? Questions, comments, reflections, funny stories or other stories?
Just an observation. I think that where creativity works really well, you do need to have a small team of people who will challenge what you're saying and take it on and run with it. And see what I mean? You might get the chap you're saying who's very introverted, loads of ideas, but if there's the right people around them, you can create that atmosphere where things can happen.
Yeah,
that's just an observation from,
as I call it, the chemistry really matters, and the tolerance of awkward ideas. I mean, the worst thing, I do a demonstration with music about musical dissonance, and musical dissonance is when these notes jar together. But dissonance in the boardroom is when the board are all sitting there and a new guy comes in, or a new girl, and says, hey, I think we should do X. And they all sort of look around and go, oh, God. Or they don't. They just go, very good. And then they go out to the toilets and talk about the person, get rid of him, he's an idiot. They should listen to that person, because in business you may make billions of dollars from weird ideas that work, and but often they're ignored. But in music you do make millions of pounds from riffs that don't quite sound right but stick in your ear and you can't get them out of your head. So actually there is a parallel there as well with listening to. And I tell people at the end of that sort of seminar that, listening better to unfamiliar ideas, or ideas that at first sight don't sound right, because most creativity requires idea development, which is where a team kicks in to say, okay, it's a bit, that's where the innovators, it has to be not necessarily tamed, but shaped. They're different things.
I was going to say, I think we in our team, we talk quite a lot about mindset, and it strikes me that sort of bridging the gap between creativity and innovation for us and the businesses we work with quite often is the mindset. And exactly what you were saying, sometimes a business will have a great idea, but if you get the MD or the CEO who won't listen to challenge,
I don't live far.
they think they've got the best things. So hail your microphones.
Hang on, Anisha, we've got two conversations.
Okay.
Could you mute yourself?
Oh, there we go.
Carry on.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that sometimes if we work with an MD or a CEO who won't take challenge, that mindset piece is not open-minded. They think they've got the best thing since sliced bread and they can't understand why it's not selling. And it's really difficult if they won't have that open mindset to actually work with them. And we're mentors and coaches, so we're not there to do the work for them, but we need to be able to challenge.
And that comes back to setting the psychological contract with the person right at the beginning, or later on, or both, because if you have a conversation about what you're offering and what you're not offering, it's a whole lot easier to do. But they don't always listen to it the first time, so you may have to restate it, of course. But what they can expect from you, in terms of whether you're going to tell them what to do, whether you're going to support them, the style in which you operate. So I do some coaching, and the first conversation I have is, I don't charge for it. It's whether the chemistry works, whether they get it. And if I feel they're not going to get it, I usually, at my time of life, walk away. You don't have that luxury, I suspect, but you have to, or as I say in music, I'm going to tell you how it's going to be, which is a line from a Rolling Stone song. But I don't tell them. I'm going to explain what they're going to get and what they're not going to get from me. I think having that clear contract of what, because later on when it doesn't work, you can say, you remember what we said, or you don't have to lecture them about it. You sort of slip it into the conversation. But I think it often goes back to being, having a clear contract with someone, so that they know. But we slip into all sorts of contracts that need refinement, don't we, over time? And of course, they see what you do, and then they say, well, can't you tell me what I'm doing wrong? And then you tell them and they don't like it. So yeah, it's the whole minefield of personal chemistry and coaching is another subject, really. But yeah, absolutely.
If there's no more questions or comments, also feel free to send it later on. We can share it with Peter. I'm conscious about the time. Shall we finish up and say big thank you to Peter for coming for this? Yes.
I'll say one more thing first. If you like this, the best thing you could do is join up on LinkedIn or tell me about it, or more importantly, tell someone else that wants it. I'm still actively employed. I don't want to tread on your parade, as it were, but if you need a speaker or a facilitator for something, I'm available for hire. That's all I want to say.
Brilliant.
I think, sorry, I was just going to say quickly there, I think the thing with us, Peter, is that it's not, when you say rain on parade, we're not precious about providing the support to businesses. It's kind of, we can't all be knowledgeable in every area of it. And we're very conscious about where the expertise and knowledge is. We do refer out as well in certain cases, if the right support is needed. But we've got to show some sort of impartiality. We're not just pushing forward. Just keep them saying, Peter, but I'd love to have your details moving forward.
It's not a desperate need. I'm 66. I've done quite well in life, but I just like to make that small mention, and I do a range of things, and you'll get the slides in the presentation. You can see all the bits behind it, but I'm on LinkedIn as well, so but there's no pressure there. I'm it's not that I don't care anymore, but I don't mind if we get to do it.
Okay, completely. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Peter.
Can I just make a quick point? Sorry, Peter, this isn't necessarily related to your talk, slightly more boring. Tracy's asked if we could all join, if you're available, join the bite size, which will be on submitting invoices and expenses. So I'm just passing on a message from Tracy.
I'm going to sound like Donald Trump now. I love submitting invoices. I love it. Yeah, let's do it.
But Peter, very enjoyable session, very original. Thank you so much for the music as well. Incorporating that was really interesting.
All right.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to having you. Have a good Christmas.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.